Morning everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Phil Beckwith, the professional painter and decorator, and I'm here to talk to you about a Little Greene paint again. This is Little Greene and it is the Intelligent Satin. Previous videos, I'm going to say top left hand corner. That is the top left hand corner for me looking at the screen, but actually it's the top right hand corner for you. If you want to watch about the Little Greene Intelligent Eggshell, there's a video just there. You can get my thoughts on what that paint actually was, and now this video is all about their Intelligent Satin. Now, bit of backstory, I've been very privileged, I'll say privileged. My local rep, Amy, I met at the Brewers event up in Mansfield back in June of 2025. That's just in case you're not watching it in 2025. Now, that video's there with the playlist of all the trade stands that I spoke to. Now, we were talking to Amy because she's their rep for Little Greene, and they do Bradite. That's all under the same company, so she's got multiple portfolios to deal with. Bradite, Little Greene, and the other one that I'd not seen before is the Paint and Paper Library paints. Now, I'd not used Little Greene for a long while, never used Paint and Library paints before, and Amy says, Phil, I'll send you some sample tins. So that's all it is. There's no sponsorship, there's no paid endorsement for me to say how good a paint is, albeit I know the reputation that these paints have got. So I'm going to be giving my true, honest John, honest Phil's view on what Little Greene paints are like, similar to what I do with Bradite and also Paint and Paper Library. If you've not heard of that paint, please check out that playlist there because there are some videos in there. So Amy sent me some sample tins out. Very lucky. Eggshell, satin and the gloss. So if you've not seen them already or we're coming up to them, you will be seeing them in the future. So today's music. So today's video is all about their Intelligent Satin. If you don't know about the range of Little Greene paints, they're all mostly water-based now. They do the Tom's oil-based paint still, but it is all water-based. Satin is dry roughly about 2 to 3 hours. If you've seen the video on the Eggshell, that's more 4 hours. So drying time, you'll probably, I would say, err on the side of caution, go to the more 3 hours before you start coating up again for a second coat, but be mindful that if it is still hanging a little bit wet, just leave it a bit longer. I try and do these videos if I paint a door and come back the next day. Always find it nicer to actually apply the paint over a door that's properly dried. I'm not going to say cure because curing and drying is two different things, but for drying and actually applying another coat of paint, this is 2 to 3 hours. So I would say go a little bit more than 3 just in case. But if it is dry for you, bang another coat on. Right, this paint now, water-based. Wash with water, a little bit of warm soapy water will clean your brush out beautifully. It can be brushed, it can be rolled, and it can be sprayed. So if you don't know anything about spraying and things like that, please check other videos that I've done on my channel which talk about spraying, either airless spraying or HVLP spraying. So we cover everything on this channel. Right, something that I didn't know about, which I do know about now because I'm trying these paints out. Little Greene have gone on to the more 2-in-1 sort of paint. So this is your undercoat. It is in effect your primer and it's your top coat in one. That doesn't mean that you do away with a layer of paint. It doesn't mean you just give it one coat because it's doing everything in one. No, you don't do that. It is a 2-coat system. I will put the asterisk around that 2-coat system because if you are going over a door, and we've got Doris there that's a dark colour, you may benefit from an extra coat. Now that extra coat might be using their all-purpose primer, because if you have got a problem surface, and again I'm going to say problem surface, always read the back of the can, always read the technical data sheets online if you've got a question about the surface that you're going over, the substrate. But if you've got a dark colour that you want to build up and it might be a bit of a problem surface to you, probably go for the all-purpose primer to start with, then 2 coats of the top coat of whatever the paint is that you're using. But for today's experiment, Doris had been painted in the Eggshell, which you can see it's a bit of a darkish greyish greenish, bluish, whatever it is. How can I say I'm colourblind? I'm colourblind. But it is a dark colour. I'm not sure what this colour is that I'm going over, but bear in mind when the name of the paint is Bone China Blue, I think I might have a rough idea, particularly when it says pale. So Bone China Blue, pale, it might not be too bad for 2 coats over that. But if you are doing a proper you know what I mean. If you're going from a black to a white or a white to a black, you might want to build up with an extra layer of paint. And let's see how we go. I think 2 coats will be all right. But it is an all-purpose paint. It is a primer and undercoating one. What I would say is if you've got bare surfaces, if you're not using or you've not got the all-purpose primer with you, I would say just get a little bit of this paint out, thin it with a spot of water so it's a little bit thinner, put it onto the bare substrate, whether it be wood or plaster, and let it actually soak in, let that dry, and then you can rub it down a lot easier, and then you can do your filling and bits and pieces. We're going to basics, aren't we? Basics of painting and decorating. But today's job, I'm going to get a coat of paint on there. I'm going to give you my thoughts on what it's like first initial applying it. I'm going to then stop. I'm going to come back, speak to you when it's actually all coated up. It'll still be wet because that'll be the first coat that's gone on. And then I will come back in a good number of hours. I'm first thing in the morning now, so I'll come back later this afternoon, give it a second coat, and then when that's dry, I will come back and give you a conclusion at the end of what I've thought about the paint. Now, if you didn't see the video about the eggshell, this is the Little Greene Intelligent Eggshell that's on there. I've actually taped up that section so we can see what that's like compared to the rest of it when it's painted. You've seen me at the beginning of the video. I've rubbed it down and dusted it off and blown it off to get any dust off there. If you've got a tack rag, you can use a tack rag as well. But what we're going to be doing is looking at the comparison between the sheen levels. Now, this sheen level I'm expecting between about 30 and 40%. The eggshell was roughly about that 10 to 20%. And I want to see what the actual sheen level will be like between the two. Now, that eggshell wasn't too bad. It's quite a pleasant finish. Personally, my personal preference, I prefer the satin finishes that are more the 40 to 50%. I like to see a little bit more sheen to it. I'm not saying to a gloss, but I like to see that little bit more sheen on a satin. For me, sometimes the eggshells and some of these finishes that are around about that 20 to 30% are still a little bit too flat for me as a finish. Now, these paints can be used on your ceiling, it can be used on your walls, and it can be used on your woodwork. So they are a paint that can actually be colour drenching your ceiling, walls and woodwork if you so want to do. I currently am on a job that we are using Little Greene paints, and we are doing exactly that. We are using the same colour on the ceiling, on the walls, and then the actual woodwork is being done in the same colour, but it is being done in a satin finish. So we have a flat ceiling, we've got a flat wall, and then we've gone satin on the actual woodwork, but the colour is all the same. Now, another thing I'm going to just say to you, when I did the eggshell video, I was a little bit not disappointed because it's a nice paint. I was a little bit disappointed that it was leaving a little bit of a brush mark and it wasn't flowing out as well as I'd have expected. I was getting a little bit of flashing when I was joining up between a mounting rail and a cross rail, same cross rail and then a stile. If you were overworking it and brushing back into yourself, which you do when you do hand painting of a door, you can start getting some drying off. And I would say that the flow out of the eggshell wasn't as good as what I've probably tried and reviewed when I've done some samples of the paint and paper library paint. Even though they're the same company, there are different paints, so it's not like one lot of paint goes into different cans, far from it. This, I could tell there was a difference in the paint between the Little Greene and the paint and paper library paint, which it's all down to personal preference. Somebody might prefer this over the other. It's all down to you as the decorator, as the DIY, as the person who's actually applying the paint. So yeah, I wasn't blown away by that eggshell. I like the finish, but it's just the brush application. It didn't flow out as well as I wanted to. So I'm going to be expecting the satin, the Intelligent Satin, to be a little bit better. I'm hoping that's got a little bit more flow, but I don't know because I've not even opened the tin yet. Another thing to just put people's mind at rest. When you're talking about the intelligent range of paints with the Little Greene, it is the hard wearing range of paints. You can wipe it down. Don't be frightened of using it on metal surfaces. So if you've got radiators or if you've got windows, metal frame windows, you can actually use these paints on there. So always read the back of the can if in doubt. And also there's always a phone number. You can ring somebody up if you want technical advice from these companies. So if in doubt, pick up a phone. Failing that, you're watching YouTube because you want to get my review on it. So I'm going to get the paint out. We're going to start getting it painted. I'm keeping with the same brush that I used for the eggshell. We are on the Series X series of brushes. This is what we're looking for if you want to know what these brushes are. This is the Maverick brush. It is the oval shaped. This has been washed out, so it's a bit spraggy at the minute, but it will come together. Is that I can't think who sang that song. If you know who sang that Come Together song, comments below. I can't remember. Anyway, Series X brush, really nice. I have previously used, this is a 2-inch, I have previously used the Series S, which are a lot softer bristles. So if you've got fine finishing of doors that you're using paint that you want a little bit softer brush mark flow out, you use the Series S like that. But the Series X, see that? Different bristle altogether, and I do like it. The oval shape does suit me for painting doors. The ferrule, which is the metal part all the way around, if you don't know about the makeup of a brush, you've got the length out, you've got the stock that goes into the ferrule goes around, then you've got the handle, which is, that's the basics. But that ferrule is all in one. It is one piece all the way around, and your bristles are tightly packed into that. So yeah, let's stop now. Let's get some paint out and let's have a see what the paint feels like. Right, we're back. I've got the paint out. Keep telling everybody, work from one side of the kettle. This is a proper tapered paint kettle. Mixing this paint up, lifting the lid. Can you see that colour? It's really light, so it'd be interesting to see what the opacity is like with this. Well, mixing the paint up feels really thick in the paint tin. Now, I'm going to say to you, and I've said times many, try some paint before you actually start adding any thinner to it. Now, this is a water-based paint, so you would thin it with clean water. Don't be thinning it down naturally thinking you're going to be thinning the paint down because it's going to need it straight away. Try the paint before you start making that decision. With it being a woodwork paint, I won't be saying to you put water to it straight away until you've actually started working with it, because if you start thinning a paint down, you're going to thin down that consistency of what that paint makeup is as well. So you might get a little bit better coverage, i.e. it'll go a bit further because you've thinned it down, but you might just lose that opacity and that guts that the paint wants. So this is first for me. I'm starting off painting the door. You start with your mouldings, do your panels, do that all the way around, and then you come back to your munting rails and your top rails and your stiles and do it that way. Yeah, we've got that times many. So I'm going in with it's a very light colour. It is almost like a white. I'm just feeling this paint first. It's going on nicely because I'm going over a nice quality paint of the Little Greene Eggshell from before. I'm just getting it on, getting the brush worked in, feeling the paint, seeing what it's like, then coming to that panel. Right, not too bad, it doesn't need thinning. Right, let's get going. Don't worry too much about how it's looking when you put that first coat of paint on, because it is very much that first coat of paint. The opacity isn't going to be there straight away, is it? Because it's the first coat. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just knocking off any fatty edges that's on the flats of the door. Let's get it off like that. So far, what I expect, if we can get in a bit closer, very much grinning because we've got a light colour going over a dark. That'll dry off. It might body up slightly. I'm not holding my breath, but it might just body up slightly. Some paints do. But what I'm going to do is get all this door painted and see what it's actually like, and I'll come back to you when I've got it all on. But so far it applies all right, and laying off, it'd be interesting to see what the brush marks are like. So catch you in a bit when I've done all this door. Okay, give me 10 minutes and I've coated the door up within a couple of minutes of that. Now I've washed the brush out and I've come back just to see what we like. Now that feels a water-based paint that feels like you're putting a paint on. It's not something too thin that you feel, oh god, it's just like thin down emulsion. It's not that, or vinyl silk because we're using a satin. It's not like that. It does feel like you're actually applying a paint, which is great. What I am seeing is, as I said just a few minutes ago, don't be too hung up on getting your perfect brush marks on that first coat. As long as you're going in the correct direction for a door, how a door should be painted, don't worry if you've got little scraggy bristles touching anything. You will make that good when you come to your final coat. But I am seeing when I come back into a brush stroke, you know, if you're painting like a wax crane or something like that, it does look like there's a little bit of an element of a waxy surface have gone over, with it being that eggshell there, which I don't think it is. It might be just how the brush has come back into itself. If I can bring you in, I don't know whether you can see that. Can you see that just there? That's obviously my brush stroke coming back into itself, but it's not blended too well. So it's going to be interesting to see what it's like when it's actually fully dried and I get a second coat on. But so far it's not been too bad. I'll sit on the fence at this first coat stage. Brush marks, I am seeing a little bit of an element of a brush mark, and some people are going to say it's probably your brush you're using, quite possibly, but I want to try these brushes out. I'm trying to keep consistent with the eggshell, the satin, and I'll use it for the gloss to see what they're all like. I don't want to chop and change. I'll keep with that Maverick brush for now. But all in all, it's gone on all right. It applied fine. I didn't struggle with it. I'm just going to be saying to you, it is grinning now. It is starting to dry off, and it's still looking like that colour showing through. That's what we call grinning. That's where you start saying the body and the opacity of the paint that you're putting on, what's in it. What's in it to actually give it that guts to actually cover for opacity. Now this colour that we're using, I have actually just wiped out the paint kettle. It is a very pale blue, so to me this is quite a good paint to try, because it is like trying to use a pale or a white colour over a dark colour. So this pale blue is going to be ideal to see what the opacity of the paint's like. Yeah, do you know what? If it's 2 to 3 hours for a recoat, I'm see it. I'll come back after lunch and we'll get a coat on, and then I'll give it another 2 to 3 hours to dry, and then we'll give a conclusion. So far so good, not too bad. We'll see later. Hello and welcome back. Now I've second coated that door. I gave it a good, you know, when we said about the 2 to 3 hours, I was probably near 4 hours. I'd got a bit of heat on in my studio. It was lovely and dry, and I came in and I gave it a second coat. I'm now a good 2.5 hours after coating that door up, and I'm coming back to review it. So let me move the camera around and let's get a little bit up close and personal with this door. Just brought the camera in between me talkie. I'm looking at the brush marks going across that mid rail there. You've got your munting rail there. You know when I say about blending out between the two, I'll move you up a bit. I've just brought the camera in a little bit closer. We're just looking at the brush marquee. We're going across that middle rail. It's in middle, it's mid rail, it's up at the top. That's your munting rail. Where you come down with that, and then you'd be overlapping and flowing through with your brush across there. To get the idea, you come down and then you go across that way to blend out. Sometimes you might have to just feather it back into itself. I'm not seeing too much flashing, so that is a positive point. The little bit of brush marks around that edge there, just creeping. Coming down to this section there, again, you'd bring that down like that and then just follow with a nice cutting in across that line. Same with the sides, because these are the styles. You go across there and then you bring that down so you got a nice line there. Now, I would expect a little bit more flashing than that being the satin wood. It's not. So on a plus, that seems to have flowed out all right into itself. But there again, as I've been saying, I worked quickly with this. I didn't work it. I didn't overwork it. I didn't play with it. I just banged it on and laid it off, and that was it. So, yeah, I don't know. Let's get the camera back into the usual position. Okie dokie. I'm going to say I'm not blown away. Not too much on a negative. I've had to make some notes when I was coating up, so I've got some notes. Right, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, and we're talking about opacity, and a lot of people call it coverage. That clearly is grinning through. The opacity of that satin wood is pants. Well, shall I say, is what I would expect for covering over such a dark colour. So we've got, don't want to say negative, already I'm just thinking if that went for a third coat, I would say I've been very lucky. I think there could be a fourth coat just to make sure. Yeah. Anyway, it's very, very grinny just here. I'm just going to bring you in, if you can see that. The grinniness there. And you didn't want to pile the paint on. You don't want to put loads on it. You can't put more on than you need to be putting on, or else all you're going to do is get runs and curtains forming, and curtains are where you've got literally a proper drip of paint going all the way down it. So I'm going to say now, opacity is not fantastic. I think if you were going over a lighter colour and not something dark like that, it would be fine for 2 coats. So that's the only thing. Over a dark, don't expect it to be covering for 2. 3 coats, and I think to be happy around these mouldings, you might be looking at 4. Yep. Right, what was the other things that I picked up on? Big deep breath. When I was putting it on, I put a note as I was working, it pulls. Right. You had to work quite quick with it, and I say with water-based paints, don't play about with it. This was one of the paints that was at that extreme of literally you couldn't do you couldn't work the paint, you couldn't overbrush it. You had to get it on and then leave it, because there is an element to it that it did feel quite thick applying it. Even though that door was dry and had left it plenty of time for recoating, I was struggling with it. It felt not sticky, it just felt like the paint was pulling and it didn't want to glide as easy as I thought it should be doing over itself, which is a satin wood finish. The sheen level at that, what we were saying, 30%, 35% sheen level is quite nice. You can see it there, it's quite a good sheen level. But you would expect that going over itself on a sheen level of that, it would glide on. It didn't feel it was gliding on. I've wrote down on it here, it pulls. Work fast, don't play about with it. And the next thing I'd put down on here, it's in effect the lack of flow. It seemed to be lacking that ability just to still be an open wet time and flow into itself, that you would lose that little bit of a brush mark. I mentioned about brush marks before. The brush marks aren't a bad thing, because that is a sign of a paint that is a water-based paint and you've brushed it, but sometimes it can look at it, it's not tram lining, but sometimes you can look at it and think it's a little bit brush marky. Tram lines would be quite heavy, like a ploughed field. It's not quite as bad as that, but you do notice some brush marks in it, and I would say that is because I couldn't work it. It didn't have the flow, it didn't want to blend back into itself as you're working along. You had to get it on and leave it. Now, if you were using a microfiber roller, would you get a better finish with it? I think a microfiber roller, even at a 5mm microfiber, might give it a bit of a mottled effect, with a grinniness of a dark colour underneath it. Over a light colour, you would probably be fine. So I'm going to say the lack of flow on that, it was quite, I don't want to say poor, but I felt that it could do with something to it to help with the flow. Now, I said earlier, don't put water to paint because you're going to lose that obliterate, you know, it's going to thin the paint down. But I think in this instance, some paint conditioner might help that to apply it. I'm just putting it out there. Spot of water or paint conditioner. I think I'd probably go with a little bit of paint conditioner to help with the flow and the application of the paint. So that might be something to bear in mind if you are applying this. Just put something to it just to help it flow out. Quite a few notes, sorry. Something I want to just touch on. This is a Little Greene paint. It comes under the Bradite brand of paints. Now, the Bradite paint, because there's some technology in this Little Greene Intelligent Eggshells, glossers, and this satin wood that are very much in. I've got tins around me. The Bradite paints. Now, the Bradite 1 can is only available in eggshell and a matte finish. They don't do a satin. Now, I like the Bradite 1 can, and I would say the Intelligent Eggshell, probably it's on the same sheen level as what a Bradite 1 can is, but there's some technology in the Bradite 1 can that's in this. That's probably why this is now a 2-in-1 product, that it is self-priming and everything. It'll be a hard wearing finish if it's very much a sister paint of the Bradite 1 can, but I would say the 1 can, I've used that a number of times. I'd say the Bradite 1 can is an easier paint to apply, particularly brush. Bear in mind, if you have got these changing colours, you might still see some grinning no matter what paint you are using. So there is the technology in it, but Bradite 1 can don't do a satin. Now, if Bradite 1 can did a satin, would it be giving me would it give me the results that I'm finding with this Little Greene Intelligent Satin wood that it is? I struggle applying it. I don't know. Would a Bradite satin be the same as this? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's something to think about. And another thing I'm going to say is, I'll give a positive. I do like the sheen level. Do like the sheen level. It'll be a hard wearing finish, so don't be fearful of using it anywhere in your home. But I do want to ask the question, you know, when these get trialed at the manufacturers, and if anybody's watching that knows this, how do they get tested? Who's actually testing these paints? What do they test it on? What surfaces do they test it on? What substrates, like I do for my testing? Where do they test it to say, right, that paint's ready to go out to the general public, to decorators to actually use? Because I'm going to say it, and I've put my neck on the line. I've said before, I've got the sample tins to try, but to give an honest review on it. And I'm a decorator. I'm a professional painter and decorator. And I'm going to say to you is, as a painter and decorator, I don't think this is the best paint that I've tried. It is a very nice paint. The colour card's really good, and application wise it will go on all right. It's just I'm being very critical with how it's applied over a dark colour. The light colour application over another light colour would be fine, but as a manufacturer that is testing paints, who tests these paints to go, oh, that's ready to go out to the general public? Because I've just tested this, and I would say I don't think this paint, for what you pay for it, is actually at the level of what that value of paint is, if that makes sense. I would have expected this to go on a lot better than it has done. I would have expected the flow out to be better, and I would have expected that opacity, albeit we've gone over, I keep saying, going over a dark colour, just that opacity to have that little bit more body to it. So I'm going to say, who tests it? If you're the person that tests this paint, tell me how you test it. What brush do you use? What roller do you use? Are you spraying it over surfaces that you're getting an even coverage of paint that's not having a brush contact that puts on and takes off as you're moving your brush around? Just tell me, how are these paints actually tested? Because to me, I'd be a little bit disappointed to think that this is what's been sent out for the value of what the paints are. This is your higher end paint. This isn't your mid, it's not your lower, it is more at the top end of what the paint costs. And I know what the paint costs because we've recently bought tins of their emulsion. Now 5 litres of emulsion are as good as about 120 quid of 5 litres. That's a lot. 2.5 litres of the Intelligent Eggshell's been about, I think we've paid about 80 something pounds. It's not cheap paint. Now when you start looking at other paints that I've trialled, if I mention, and I'm looking at the back, if I mentioned semi-gloss in Benjamin Moore, opacities, we're still going to have problems with opacity over dark colours, but flow out of paints, I like to see a paint that flows out. I don't want to be seeing brush marks like this. The Eggshell, I question the brush marks. The Eggshell's not as bad as what this satin is, and I think it's because that satin wasn't working, it wasn't moving, it wasn't flowing. We've tested those Little Greene sister paint company, which is the paper, Paint and Paper Library. I quite like that. The Eggshell finish was very good, that flowed out. And if you've seen that video, whether it was before this one or after this one, their satin, that isn't a bad paint. And having only just recently done that video in the series of what I'm doing here, I know that that actually probably applied a bit better than what this applied. But am I being too critical? I don't know. I don't know. I think that's about it. If you're seeing videos at the end, please watch them. It helps the channel with the algorithms. I'm going to say again, people who buy me a coffee and doing me super thanks and clicking the description below and seeing those links, thank you very much. Watch these videos at the end. That will follow on with other things for you to probably engage with. But all in all, not a bad paint. I will be using it again because we do use it on jobs. But on this instance of trying it on Doris the door, going over a dark colour, I have given you my honest opinion, and I can't sugarcoat it if I'm a little bit disappointed. Yes, I know there might be videos at the end. There might be another couple of coats required over that darker colour. It would probably benefit from me it probably would have benefited from me using the all-purpose primer to blank out that before I went over with the 2 coats of this Bone China Blue, pale. See you on the next one, everybody.